Quick shout out to the Papaga Gaming channel, putting all my gaming stuff on there. All right, listen. Somebody told me that in this video with Ben Shapiro, that Benjamin says something about how people on Mars or something wouldn't think being gay is okay, or I don't know. That's what they told me to watch this video. So I'm definitely intrigued. Really quick, for those of you who like the Papaga Gaming content, link is in the bio description and the suggested channels. Let me put that back up. So I'm moving my content there. All right, I'm a boomer. Let's get going.
Online is Matt Walsh, host of the Matt Walsh Show on Daily Wire Plus, and star of the massive hit documentary "What Is a Woman?" Matt recently appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast, where he defended traditional marriage in the face of Joe's cynicism on this particular.
Yeah, Joe kind of schooled him. He's been a little preposterous about it. I watched it. You can go look up Papaga Matt Walsh Joe Rogan gay marriage. You can Google it yourself. Lazy.
Matt, thanks so much for running the show. Good to talk to you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So the Senate is supposed to bring up for a vote, I believe today, the so-called Respect for Marriage Act, which actually just is not respect for marriage. It's respect for same-sex marriage.
It's respect for all marriage. It doesn't say we're going to destroy, like heterosexual marriages at the stake of homosexual marriages. So it is not just for it's to hold them equally. Here's the thing, and I feel like you need to be this way because usually Republicans will jerk off, or they'll pretend to jerk off the law. They'll pretend to respect the laws until they don't adhere to their own. Like, don't we all? You know what I mean? I'm not wearing a seatbelt. Separation of church and state is very important. Okay. If marriage never got you tax benefits, then I would sit here and say, I don't care what you call it. Gay people can get a union. It doesn't matter. But the second that you got tax incentives for marriage, it was recognized by the government as a government institution, as well as a religious backing. But those two things are separate, right? So you could sit here and say, well, I don't think that two gay people's marriages are actually valid under the eyes of God. Believe that if you want. Be my guest. But they are legally binding and should always, forever be protected. That's it. It goes as far as that. You could sit here and say you don't think God approves. That's totally fine. Do your religious thing, but don't sit here and try to invalidate a very, very, very fundamental aspect of the United States. Okay, all right. That's what it comes down to. And I feel like a conservative could say exactly what I said. Hey, listen, I'm religious. I don't think that that gay marriage is respected under the eye of God, but I do recognize that the institution of marriage is now something that the government has supported with tax cuts, and because of that, I believe in separation of church and state as an American and as a patriot. And so, bada bing, bada boom, you're able to come to your moral conclusion. You're good. So,
the act itself supposedly carries provisions that would protect religious freedom.
Good.
They don't go far enough in that direction, as Roger Severino has written.
How far do you think they should go? What are they not doing far enough in?
Also, the simple fact of the matter is that why would Congress even have to pass such a law, considering that the Supreme Court has already determined that same-sex marriage is the law of the land, other than to get Republicans on record supporting the non-true idea that marriage is not between a man and a woman. Ben has to know that he's lying there. He just has to. Because Ben is very intelligent. The reason that they're pushing to codify the protection of same-sex marriage is because something that I never thought would happen in my lifetime happened. They overturned the protections of Roe v. Wade, leaving it up to the individual states whether abortion should be legal or not. Because of that, and we've already seen Ted Cruz and I think Clarence Thomas already bring it into question. The next thing on the chopping block are the rulings that protect same-sex marriage. It can happen. And it will happen, or it may happen, if we don't codify it. It's that simple. You can say that you don't, and to ignore that fact is very disingenuous. Ben can say they shouldn't do this because I think it should be up to the states. I fundamentally disagree with you, but at least you're being honest. But this is a dishonest interpretation, and it's intentional to increase the division between Democrats and Republicans and intentionally misrepresent their side to make it seem like a malicious attack against conservatives rather than an understandable movement forward. This is a dishonest tactic by Ben Shapiro. That's the problem. If you want to be homophobic or bigoted, you shouldn't, but be my guest, but be honest about it. Just tell me to my face that you think gay is yucky. And I'll say, okay, you know what? I disagree, but there's not a lot to talk about because, hey,
You know, sometimes I get soft when I see gay dudes too. The worst is when you're beating it to some porn and then like they're on the girl and then like right when you're finished, the guy's face is like, oh, and you're like, oh, I just came on a guy's face. You know what I'm saying, dude? It's the fucking worst. So yeah.
Right, it doesn't make any sense. And also, I mean, if you can read the language in that bill and believe that this is actually going to protect religious liberty, then there's not much we can say to you. That's just...
What about religious liberty does it not protect? What's the problem with it?
That's naivete to the extreme.
What doesn't it protect?
This sets up, among other things, an assault on religious liberty, because if the federal government is declaring from on high that marriage now includes same-sex couples and they're codifying that definition into law,
good,
and it's a violation of someone's human rights. You know, if someone has a human right to be involved in a same-sex marriage,
yes, separation of church and state. Found their country on it.
Then it's not hard to see how eventually this comes down to the churches, and they say to the churches, well, you don't have the right to deprive people of their human rights.
Listen, I don't know that specifically. I doubt that that's true. A church, I believe, can still... I don't know if this law says that. All it says is that the government can't deny them a marriage. If a church doesn't want to marry gay people, I don't think that they have to. And I don't think that they should have to, by the way. I vehemently disagree. But with this ideology of like not marrying gay people, but as long as there's somebody, the government is available to marry gay people, that's all I care about. It is called a marriage. It is a legal marriage and is binding. As long as the government honors that. I don't care if like some bumfuck church in Arkansas says we're not going to marry two gay people. I don't give a shit about that. What I care about is the access to being able to get married. Right? That's all I care about. If the church wants to deny the access of gay people, I don't give a shit about that. Right? So there you go. Hot take.
And the fact that Republicans are apparently signing on to this,
good.
It just shows you again the state of the Republican Party. I mean,
yeah, it's fucking sane.
10 years ago, certainly 15 years ago, but probably 10 years ago, this would have been considered extreme even on the left. The idea that the federal government is going to decide and codify this issue. And
wasn't it 10 years ago that we did that, or was that 2006? When did we legalize gay marriage? When was gay marriage? 2015. So technically he's right. It would be considered an extreme perspective. Technically 2015 is when we legalized gay marriage, when the Supreme Court struck down a ban on the marriages. So technically you're right, but then we decided to make it legal in 2015. So your wording is correct. 10 years ago, it would have been considered extreme because even Obama came out and said, I think that there should be a separate gay union, not a marriage. But then when the decision was upheld by the Supreme Court, he's like, okay, fair enough. That was pretty much how that went. So you're technically right, but also like your interpretation makes it seem malicious. It's 2015, guys. I looked it up. It's just like a weird interpretation. Like, okay, times change. Gay people, separation of church and state. Get dunked on, fucking conservative.
And but as we so often see, what was extreme far left a decade or decade and a half ago is now something that even conservatives will take part in.
Okay, it's a gay. It's literally you could still like not agree with gay people and still understand that it's something that the country is founded on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that they're pretending this bill does is
at least they're being openly homophobic. By the way, hey, we're finally there. Ben and Matt, they're lying about it to our face, but like they very clearly are openly homophobic because they just cannot cope with this.
Protect religious institutions from.
I love this. This is going to be like the arc that like really gets them to go. Wow, these guys are actually a little sussy.
Having to celebrate or solemnize a same-sex marriage, religious liberty already protects that under the Constitution of the United States. Instead, it apparently adds a rule of construction saying the bill by itself would not deny tax-exempt status, licensing, grants, and contracts, quote-unquote, not arising from a marriage. But it actually doesn't do anything to address the problem with this particular issue. I mean, it's a really poorly written...
I'm not understanding the issue.
United States denies a same-sex marriage, quote-unquote, protect... Yeah, I mean, one of the things that they're pretending this bill does is, quote-unquote, protect religious institutions from having to celebrate or solemnize a same-sex marriage.
Oh, good. What is solemnize? I'm going to assume that means validate that. Okay, good. They shouldn't have to. I could disagree with it, but the individual church itself shouldn't have to, as long as somebody can. There you go.
Religious liberty already protects that under the Constitution of the United States. Instead, it apparently adds a rule of construction saying the bill by itself would not deny tax-exempt status, licensing, grants, and contracts, quote-unquote, not arising from a marriage.
Okay, good.
But it actually doesn't do anything to address the problem with this particular issue. I mean, it's a really poorly written...
What's the problem?
amendment by Mitt Romney, particularly Susan Collins as well.
Okay, so the problem is that they're saying it's poorly written, but they wouldn't write it in a way that it's not poorly written. They just don't like the bill, and they're saying that they don't like the writing because of it. That's it. There's nothing. It's not that deep.
Another amendment that's been proposed to this, called the First Amendment Defense Act, proposed by Mike Lee. I notice they're not voting on that. But put aside the rule of construction. The thing that's really
I don't know what that is. Explain.
Is that it is now apparently the law of the land and societal rule that the only rationale that you would possibly have for saying that a marriage is between a man and a woman is because you're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim. That's really the only reason at all. That the only reason will allow you to have these crazy beliefs so long as you can show that they're crazy beliefs. So long as you can show that the reason that you believe that marriage is between a man and a woman is because you read it in a book and because you really believe the book. They keep saying sincere religious belief. I don't even know how you measure sincere religious belief. Are we going to like now monitor how often you go to church or to synagogue, whether you keep kosher or whether you take communion in order to determine your sincere? I mean, the same media that declares that Nancy Pelosi is a sincere religious believer who's just for the mass abortion of unborn children will declare that you, Matt Walsh, are not actively in favor of the things that you're in favor of. You're just a religious bigot. You're a bigot, right? And your religion is a cover for your bigotry. I'm highly annoyed.
But it is. And like we figured that out from a factual perspective. And the reason that we know it's bigoted is because you cannot hold the stance of being a religious person and an American patriot that doesn't support gay people getting married. Like I said, if you are a religious person and don't believe in the union of gay people, that is fine from a God perspective. If you don't think that God honors that marriage, that is your belief and you're welcome to have it. But you need to understand, again, the second we did the whole church and state thing, separation, all of a sudden we recognize that there are tax exemptions and that this is something gay people should have access to. It's literally that simple. It's that fucking simple.
By the constant derogation of non-religious arguments into religious arguments. And this is what the left loves to do. They like to say you're pro-life. The reason you're pro-life is because of your crazy religion. And so maybe we can respect your crazy religion.
No, a lot of people talk about bodily autonomy and get into like robust conversations. There's a lot of dumb fucks that talk about either both, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice. There's plenty of people who talk about it in a stupid way. So I'm sure you've heard something like that. But most of all, it's a conversation about when we assign personhood to a thing or a fetus, at what, like understanding the extenuating circumstances. It's a very complex conversation. I understand why people are pro-life. I'm not shitting on you for that. But it's more than just you like are a religious bigot, you know, or a lot of it has to do with there is really no conservative support in any true way, bill or law, that supports the babies once they come out. In fact, conservatives tend to be on the side of cutting welfare programs that wouldn't exactly help these children. There hasn't been a single robust law proposed or law at all proposed by anybody really, which is a problem, but specifically in this instance by conservatives to support our orphanages better at all. Nobody cares about that. It's more just have the baby and then we want you to deal with it instead of provide some kind of like robust thing. There are some churches that do engage in support of people, but at the end of the day, there's no conservative movement to expand on people or kids living in, and the word orphanage isn't the right word. You know what word I'm looking for? Somebody say in the chat. It's nothing. Again, it's another instance of conservatives trying to break down the pro-choice argument rather than build up the lives of like already existing children, right? It's more, to me, it comes off as a virtue signal when you're like, you need to birth the baby, but then after that, we don't give a fuck. It's like, okay, so you want it to be birthed and then potentially die of starvation or be put into a massively abusive system. You know what I mean? If you could prove to me that like once I come into a girl, a soul shoots into that thing, I'm totally down with banning abortion. But, you know, you got to prove it. Foster care system, thank you.
Along those, that is not the argument for marriage. The argument for marriage has literally nothing to do with religion. You could
it has everything to do with religion.
From Mars.
It has everything to do with religion.
You could see that all of human procreation relies on man, woman, child. This is not particularly difficult stuff. By essentially...
Okay, but you don't need to get married to make a baby. So, like, what you're saying literally doesn't matter. Marriage historically has basically been like an exchange of goods and services. Like, usually it's like a power move, especially for super rich people. They'll be like, well, we'll marry these two families so that they can merge together. That's basically what it all used to be. It wasn't this super, like, sanctimonious thing historically. It doesn't matter. You know, you could still exchange power with two gay dudes, you know?
In the argument in favor of traditional marriage into, well, if you're a crazy religious believer, maybe we'll let you have that. But, you know, if you're a cake baker.
What nuance do you feel like I'm not maintaining here? What's the nuance you feel like I'm not maintaining? Just let me know.
Then we're not sure about that, right? I mean, like, we're not sure how far this religious liberty thing extends. What you're really doing is you're setting the ground game at same-sex marriage and traditional marriage are completely the same thing. And if you object to it, the only reason that we'll even allow you to do that is because of this crazy thing called religion.
Yeah, this is the point I'm on.
Well, because there's no non-religious argument. You don't, like, unless you make a law that you, first of all, there's no law that says you can't have a baby until you're married. Second of all, there's no law that says you have to have a baby when you're married. So what you're saying doesn't make any sense.
Always trying to get across to people that you listen to these arguments, whether it's an argument about marriage, it's an argument about abortion when life begins, even arguments about the definition of man and woman. Listen to the argument between a conservative and a liberal.
What did I miss, bro? Let me know what you're talking about.
And what you're going to find is that religion almost always comes into play. Someone's going to mention the Bible, but almost always it's the person on the left who's bringing that into the conversation, because as you point out, that's the framework they want us to adopt for the argument. That's sort of like the ground.
Well, a lot of the arguments are founded on like religious ideology, for sure,
on which they want to have this. And
it's interesting that you're all very religious, and then you also, but okay,
this battle. They want to pretend that the only reason that we would
you could say it might be a lazy argument to just say you're religious, so you can't support this, but
believe the things that we believe and say what we're saying is because we've been told by our religion and we have no reasons outside of that. That, of course, that's totally illogical.
I heard the Marsh thing. It's just like a stupid thing to what he said. I was thinking about what if
it doesn't make any sense. And also when it comes to marriage, I mean, there's a reason why it's not just Christian societies, it's not just Jewish people that have said that that marriage is a fundamentally procreative union between a man and woman. Okay. You look at every society in human history, and they have come down to that conclusion. I mean, there isn't any society in history that had anything like same-sex marriage as we have today.
Not like we have today, but no societies like we had today. There are plenty of societies who used to, like the Romans used to fuck little boys, which is horrible, but it used to be more like mask feminine scenario. Who cares? Like, not for nothing, but like this idea, like, oh, these traditional societies didn't have what we have. Yeah, you know what else? They don't have toilet bowls. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like, we've evolved massively as a society into a more understanding and respectable country. Even with this kind of shit going on, things are different now. And you can't maintain an argument against same-sex marriage from a separation of church and state perspective.
And not every society has been Christian or Jewish. So this is.
Oh yeah, some of them were Muslim. All very similar religions in a lot of respects.
A conclusion that all people through history have arrived at. It's not hard to see how they arrive at that conclusion. I mean, this is what I was trying to explain on Joe Rogan.
You did a bad job because you don't really have a good argument.
The relationship between a man and a woman.
Greeks, not Roman. I thought it was both. Aren't the Greeks and the Romans so similar? Whatever.
That kind of relationship, it's just different in kind from any other sort of relationship. It has a capacity that none of these other relationships have.
Yeah, because they can have a baby. Who cares? Like, it's still love is the foundation of a marriage. That's how we look at it nowadays. Also, gay people can adopt. In fact, gay people adopt disproportionately higher, and they adopt more people who are considered undesired in general, like undesirable foster kids, which are usually older kids. So they provide an incredible service. I mean, if anything, you could look at it from a biological perspective and make a reasonable hypothesis that gay people exist to take care of for lack of a better term, unwanted children in society, to provide like loving, robust homes for them. There's actually a really solid, pretty solid hypothesis, a scientific argument as to why gay people even exist in the first place, to provide, because they don't usually have their own kids at the same rate, to provide access to taking care of kids that are others people's parents didn't want because for whatever reason. I'm sorry if that's a very blunt language. So like, you know, if we're gonna go with this biological imperative argument, I make the same argument. And maybe like, how do we know it's not nature's adopters? We can see in the wild where like a mom will die, and then like another like a mommy monkey will die, and then another monkey will come and take care of the kid, or a pig, or whatever the fuck other animal there is. We've seen instances of like fucking giraffes taking care of hyenas or some shit. You know what I'm saying? In the wild, I'm being a little crazy, but you see that there are adoptive mothers in society. So, yeah,
and that capacity makes it definitionally different. And it also makes that relationship more important to society than any other kind of relationship, because it has the capacity to create people. And so that means it has to be protected and actually respected in a way that no other relationship really has to be.
What are we? Nobody's destroying it. What protecting do you need? Hot take. Check this out. This is actually really interesting. Legalizing gay marriage doesn't mean that straight people can't get married. It's protected. It's fucking protected, bro. It's perfectly protected. I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? How is it destroyed? It's not. You have nothing there.
We'll get back to more of this in just one moment. First, does it make sense that the company that controls 90% of all internet searches also runs your email service and tracks?
Yeah, it's capitalism, Ben. We should talk about that one day. Why don't we force them to pay us back some of the money? that they take by stealing our data and selling it and giving us targeted ads. We should get paid for that because they use very intelligent, like methodical, almost predatory, whatever analysis on what we like to make us buy things. It's consumerism. And listen, I'm a capitalist, but has it gone too far?
.com/Ben. Again, there's the video. It's rely on .com/Ben Shapiro Show. Get 3 extra months for free.
Cool.
Matt, a lot of the arguments against traditional marriage rely on sort of false construction. So what they will do is
like separation of church and state. What a falsely constructed thing. Holy moly.
They'll say, well, polygamy was legal in the vast majority of cultures for a very long time. Therefore,
I've never heard anybody make this argument, but okay.
Marriage is not between one man and one woman. If you're including multiple
I'm
people,
sure someone's made it, but this is not the most popular argument.
And you're narrowing the definition. This, of course, ignores the fact that every individual dyad within that polygamous institution is a man with one woman, meaning that the whole basis of even polygamous societies, as opposed to, by the way, there is no society on record in which the opposite is true, in which a woman marries multiple men. These societies do not exist. The societies in which a man marries multiple women, we have decided over the course of time.
Shit, we got some high-value male speak here. There's no society where one woman marries multiple men. True, I guess. That's true, I suppose. But okay.
Are not the ideal. And in fact, the Bible says are not the ideal, like right at the beginning. A man shall leave his father and mother.
The Bible also says it's kind of okay to do slavery. So I'm feeling like I'm not a big fan of the Bible when it comes to stuff. Don't at me. It literally does say that. It doesn't say chattel slavery. It's just okay to enslave people that, you've dominated their cities and whatnot. So, but guys, some of them said that they were okay with being slaves to pay off a debt. Wow. Do you think that people who have debt nowadays should be slaves? If you say no, you disagree with the Bible.
And he shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. I mean, that is a monogamous relationship at the very beginning of the Bible. I mean, that's the Bible, chapter 1 of Genesis. But even if you were to...
So it's a little silly that you were talking about how one of the arguments they make, they were shitting their pants before earlier in the video, talking about how, they always say it's just a religious argument, but it's not. And now they're talking about the fucking Bible. Your whole argument in the first half of your video was about how progressives were falsely saying that everybody's just making a fucking religious argument. Now you're literally making it. You're like, that's wrong. And then how do you? This video is 14 minutes long. How did you fuck that up? And 2 of that was an ad. How did you mess this up at 8 minutes? Did you forget what you said 4 minutes ago? Yeah, they're always telling us it's just a religious argument. That's ridiculous. By the way, the fucking Bible says that this is how it should be. Okay, it's incredible.
To argue in favor of cultures that allowed polygamy. The idea there was that it was always a man, woman, child. It's just the man was pairing off with other women. It was not. It wasn't a polycule in FTX style here.
Cool.
Yeah, and the polygamous unions, if anything, it's kind of the exception that proves the rule. Because as you point out,
plus all those polygamists always have fucking red hair or pink hair, and that's my biggest issue with polyamory. It's crazy.
There was never
polygamy and polyamory are different, right? I don't care to research it, but I think so in some capacity. Who cares?
As far as I know, there was never the reverse of a bunch of men marrying one woman. And why is that? It's because maybe societies in the past that had polygamy,
I don't care.
You have even more procreation if it's a man with multiple women. Now if it was a woman with multiple men, then that's not going to result in more and more babies.
Hey, maybe they're trans men. They can have babies
being born, but the other way it does. And so these were societies, especially in more primitive times, who they also recognized that the purpose of marriage, one of the fundamental definitional purposes, is procreation, and that's where polygamy comes from. Now we don't have that in our society.
That's why biologically you literally cannot have a kid unless you're married, because it's a fundament. I don't know. Wait, where does the logic go? Oh, it doesn't.
A lot of reasons, and one of them is that we recognize that a child needs a mom and a dad, and
yeah, I think that a child needs a strong masculine and feminine figure in their life, and I think that generally men are the best at being masculine figures, and women are best at being feminine figures. My mother was a phenomenal masculine figure in my life, to be honest with you. In fact, I had very little feminine figures because my mom was a fucking man, basically. My mom was a boss-ass bitch, and I didn't exactly have my mom raised me and she did a hell of a job. I respect the hell of that woman, but she did not have a light touch, right? So you know what I mean? Women can still raise people masculinely. I could have used probably a little bit of a feminine perspective more. My mom was great to me. I'm not saying it like my mom's horrible. My fucking scum father left her when she was pregnant. So, but yeah, I agree. But that doesn't mean that has to be how it is. And you also don't have to draw these figures from your mom or your dad. 2 gay people having a kid. Let's say it's 2 gay women, and guess what? Uncles exist. So if you you can, if they can turn to the uncle to be a masculine figure, be more active in your family's world. A coach could be a good masculine figure. A teacher could be a good feminine figure. A teacher could be a good masculine figure. You get my point. Like, we all get different inspirations from different people in our lives. Like, my uncle and my scoutmaster were two very positive male role models for me. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to get everything traditionally. Different things will happen, and their kids aren't going to fucking off themselves because two women or two men marry them. As long as they're not telling their kids they have to be gay, who cares? Which they're not. I know gay people. They're not fucking psychopaths. They're normal, okay? They're normal just like the rest of us. It's not that big of a fucking deal. It's really not that big of a fucking deal. So, I hit the wrong button.
And so, not a dad.
Yeah, it takes a village. It takes a village.
And multiple moms, but a mom and a dad, and that's going to be the best thing for the child.
Two moms, two dads. Who cares?
That's really that's what this conversation should revolve around. Yeah. What's the best for a child? Every child
having two loving parents. That's it. Having two loving parents that help support them in their entire life. That is it. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is ideal. And I find it interesting that these two would be more for a single mother raising a child than two loving women or two loving men as parents. That's the problem. Because I'll tell you one thing. As a child who grows up without their mother or their father, most of the times without their father, it's not about, oh, there was no dad and my biological clock is ticking. No. It's about being unwanted by a parent. Okay? That's what it's about. Being unwanted by a parent. And you know what? If a kid goes up for adoption, and because their parents didn't want them in some capacity, that might bring anger to that kid. But two loving gay people adopting that kid and raising them as their own, that'll bring profound happiness to that child. You want to talk about outcomes? Even if you think two gay people raising a kid isn't optimal, certainly better than the foster care system. So who cares? Life isn't ideal. If life was ideal, you'd be a dirty socialist. You'd be a communist. Nobody's equal. People have different struggles. We need to allow other people to use the kindness of their heart, in some instances, to mitigate those struggles. Gay people should be able to have kids. It's a very simple thing. They're not going to destroy the children. The children aren't going to turn out to be radioactive fucking mudslingers, okay? They're just two gay people. It's really not that big of a deal. Talk to one. Like, it's that simple. Hang out with gay people. They're not that different. Okay? My wife has gay friends. Like, well, they're cool. I have gay family. They're fucking normal people. For the most part. I'm the fucking weird one, to be honest with you. You guys see my content. I'm a fucking weirdo. Who do you think's weirder? Me or my fucking gay family? It doesn't have to be that fucking deep, bro. It doesn't. You know? It's crazy. I just don't think that they give a fuck about kids in any real way. I mean, I don't mean that to be like a dick, but it's like, do you really give a fuck about kids in like the foster care system? Like, I feel like you don't. Bro, I just want like ideal world, like these kids should be adopted. It should be easier to adopt. There should be good regulations on being able to like make sure the parents are solid, but as long as they have like enough to afford a good environment for their kids, for the adopted kids, I think that's great. Who cares if they're fucking gay? Who gives a shit, dude? I mean, it doesn't have to just be a man and a woman. It should just be two loving parents.
Child that is born has a mother and a father. There's no other way to create a child. And is it best for that child to be raised by those two people or not? I think obviously it is.
Okay, so support more financial infrastructure to make that happen in a better way.
Oh, we don't want to do that.
Okay, so then let fucking people do what they want.
You know, Matt, this is the only reason that marriage is a social institution in the first place. Society has no interest in who you pair up with and have sex with. Society has an interest in how families are created because they are the units upon which society is built. Every historian, what their salt, understands this. I mean, something Robert Nisbet has wrote back in the 1950s is the idea that societies are not built of individuals. They're actually built of family units because you're born into a family unit, then you form new family units.
Yeah, a family unit. Two people is not a family unit. We need to advocate more for like more robust family units. Not just mother, father, uncle, aunt, grandma, grandpa, cousins. Family unit. It's not just two people. It really truly takes a village. And we've been able to subsidize that village through a lot of different things like schooling. Like honestly, like if you think about it, like schooling infrastructure, you know, it takes a village. This time you're paying them instead, but it takes a village. The teachers raise your fucking kids. It's part of it. A lot of people, daycare workers, raise your fucking kids. A lot of people are raising your kids. It's not just about two people. It never has been, ever. It's always about a constructive family unit trying to support people.
And these are actually the way that societies work. And societies that abandon that in favor of what we have sort of abandoned it to, atomistic individualism, they remove all of the social structures that actually provide for a healthy society. The only reason that we even care about marriage is because of the production and rearing of children. Again, society has no interest whatsoever in you want to have sex with a person and you live in the same room as the person. Why exactly?
Society had a huge problem with that. We used to kill gay people in the streets for fucking holding. We used to kill dudes in the streets for holding another dude's hand. Like, what are you talking about? Like, with the conversion therapy, which is horribly abusive, was like a normal, like a fucking normative practice back then. They're still don't do it to an extent in different some churches. What are you talking about? Society's always cared about, like for no reason. Society's always cared. This is just the only. Society has always cared about who you're fucking, even though it's none of your business. In general, society still cares. In general. Now, you just can't explicitly say, I think it's disgusting and we should ban gay people having sex. The best you can do in our society is say, we should remove the Supreme Court protection of same-sex marriage and leave it to the states. That's the best thing that they could say without coming off as too bigoted. But it's still bigoted. And if you could still say, I don't want fucking gay people to have sex and we should put them in jail for it, they'd be on board. It's the reality. You are as passive as you possibly can given our current society. If we were more regressive, you'd be like, we should ban gay hand-holding in the streets.
Would society care about that and give benefit to that? How does that help society in any way? The answer is it doesn't. Marriage is a social institution specifically because we have an interest in the bearing and rearing of children. And so essentially what it's
it's not just about bearing and rearing the children. It's about supporting the child too. Marriage isn't just about that. Like the bearing and rearing is just like having the baby and birthing it, right? Bearing and rearing it. It's about like taking care of the child as well. The marriage is much more than just make a baby. It's about supporting that child and loving and showing them a loving atmosphere to raise them.
What happened here is that we took a social institution, and then in order to rewrite the social rules, we gutted the social institution in favor of a redefinition of marriage. I think that's the thing people
You're trying to do the same thing by trying to get rid of separation of church and state. That's what you're basically advocating for, so stop pretending.
Understand when they argue about same-sex marriage. What they're really arguing about is the tip of the iceberg, meaning that the redefinition of marriage occurred back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s with no-fault divorce, with the idea of cohabitation.
I guess bearing and rearing means to support children, but yeah, my point.
Same-sex marriage is just the final outcome, probably not the final outcome. It is one of the late-term outcomes of a complete redefinition of marriage away from family formation and family structure in favor of what marriage really is about is just sort of a voluntaristic association that you make with another human being for whatever purposes you serve.
So it's about love, really, was what it comes down to. It's something that's very important to humans. I want you to notice something that's very interesting. I'm here to hate for. I'm very funny. One thing that you need to focus on is that their argument, they don't even believe it. I'm going to explain to you why. They're talking about how we need to preserve the sanctity of marriage in a more traditional sense. Okay, why aren't they supporting banning a divorce? Because it's never about that. It's just about a way to put down gay marriage. It's not about, they're saying, well, we should have all these. Okay, where's your support of banning divorce? Aren't you doing that? Why don't you ban people getting married if they can't have kids? People who are barren, women with barren wombs, and men with fucking dead swimmers shouldn't be able to get married. Let's keep pushing it. Fuck it. Why not? If it's about if the primary focus is about having kids, ban those people from being able to get married. Make it so divorce is now illegal, but you don't care about that because it's just about shitting on gay dudes and gay girls. Okay. I would never shit on a gay guy or a gay girl, but I would let them shit on me. And that's true activism.
Yeah, I mean, marriage has, you might say 3 pillars, is that it's monogamous, permanent, and procreative.
Okay, they even say it.
Yeah, I mean, marriage has, you might say 3 pillars, is that it's monogamous.
And one thing, marriage is always monogamous right now, which try to change that, but I don't care. So it's monogamous.
Permanent. And procreative. They're
only advocating for procreative. Why aren't you advocating for permanent? If you think that those are the 3 fundamental pillars of marriage for you, then you need to support no divorce. But you want to know why you won't do that, motherfucker? Because religious people still get divorced and they like to do that thing. That's it. Religious people, still highly religious people, are like, you know what? I think you should be able to get a divorce because I hate that fucking bitch. That's what they're saying. But they're not gay, so they have no attachment. And there's a lack of empathy there. And a lack of respect for separation of church and state.
And we gave up on the permanent and monogamous part back decades ago. And so it was only a matter of time before.
So then bring that back.
The final pillar falls. This is another thing that came up with Rogan. We were talking about. He said, well, why don't people have the right to get together and love each other? And who am I to say? Who are we to say who anyone is allowed to love?
Yeah, for sure. As long as it's consensual.
Well, it's like, yeah, of course you can love whoever you want. There's no laws in place that can prevent you from loving someone. But the question is, why did
we used to hurt gay people? Like, what are you talking? Like people, it was socially acceptable to just beat gay people back in the day.
Does that matter to society? What interest does society have in that? And why?
Society has a tremendous interest in promoting the idea and concept of love. What do you think keeps a stable, loving household? Listen, marriage doesn't mean anything without love. I want to explain something to you that these motherfuckers just cannot comprehend because they think so logically that they forget that humans aren't pure logic. We are emotional creatures. Without love, there is no marriage that is sustainable and healthy. Here's the reality. Two people get together, they get married, they have kids. They aren't in love. They no longer love each other. They stay together with a kid. That animosity of being with somebody that you don't love catches up. It shows the kid you're raising that this is what love is supposed to be. And then they spend their life looking for the wrong relationship that's toxic because you two taught them how to engage in a toxic relationship with each other. Oh, is it normal to constantly yell, scream, and fight with each other? Is it normal to scream in front of your children? Is it normal to... No. You're better off with two people who have a kid to respectfully break up, but still become good parents to raise their children rather than to create an emotional time bomb that will emotionally chastise their children forever. Love is profoundly important, and people just don't like to talk about it. They think it's a silly little tee-hee. It is a fundamental part of people is love. It's a very important thing. And if you laugh at that, you probably have never truly experienced it in a way where you're like, this is important. And that's what getting older is about. Getting older is about focusing on a big priority, which is love. Two people together, not married, will raise a kid better than two married people who fucking hate each other. And you know that that's a fact. So love is important. Love is very important. And to put that down shows me a lack of understanding of relationships. And I don't want to be part of that relationship structure. Marriage without love is nothing. It's a commitment you can't keep. And the question is, have you ever loved? Have you ever loved before? It's true though. It is so important. It's so important. It's so important. And if you're a young man or a young woman in your early 20s or late teens, and learn how to love. It sounds so gay and cringe. Sorry for being homophobic, but it sounds so cringe. But you need to learn to set boundaries for yourself, and you need to learn what things you can compromise on, and you need to learn about yourself enough to understand what it means to love somebody and what it means for that person to reciprocate love to you, and how to identify that you are being loved and that you are loving. You need to learn to find a relationship where it doesn't feel like being with that person is a chore. That's very important. I don't think that we teach people that. I feel like I got the opposite. I felt like I was unintentionally raised to think that a relationship had to be a chore. You know, you see all the silly things on TV talking shit about wives and all this other stuff, and it's just like a funny tee-hee moment in society. But I feel like that has had such a profoundly negative impact on my perception of relationships. I know it's like, well, it's just TV. That's a big deal. Showing love is such an important thing, and understanding how to engage in being loved is such an important thing, rather than teaching people how to put up with your significant other. It's insane. I think you'd be surprised at how many relationships of your grandparents were riddled with potential abuse and cheating. Okay? It's the reality. We need to teach people how to love, because the marriage won't be sustained without that. That's the reality, man. That's the reality.
Why do you need your love for someone to be kind of made official and codified in this way? And
why do you need to have? Why does procreative shit have to be officialized in any capacity? People can still have babies without being in marriage. It doesn't matter.
I can't think of any reason why that would be needed unless the relationship is fundamentally procreative. And the other side, they can never explain.
You can have babies without being in a relationship.
Either why exactly it's needed. That's the thing. We say that marriage has been redefined, but
sure.
it actually hasn't been. It's
Marriage has been properly defined.
the what we call the old definition, which is the only definition, has been erased or destroyed, or we've gotten away from that. But there hasn't really been a new definition put in its place. It's the same thing they've done with everything else. Like they got rid of the definition of woman, but what's the new definition? Infamously, they have none. So what is marriage now? If it's not in principle a procreative union and the foundation of the nuclear family, then what is it exactly? And I haven't gotten an answer to that. I don't think there's been an answer provided yet.
It's a tax break. I don't know. It's a tax break. That's what marriage really is. It's a tax break. It's a tax break, and it's a concept of incentivizing people to stay together to raise their kids, for sure. But the thing is that marriage was invented when we were dying at 30. Marriage was lifelong, from the ripe old age of 15 to 30, when you used to do backbreaking labor and had no time for sex or love. Love lasts 3/4 of your life now. It doesn't start at 15 and end at 30. It starts at 25 and ends at 80. And you need to learn to be somebody with somebody for a long time. And that means you have to learn what love is, or you won't be able to sustain that. There it is. That's what it comes down to. There's probably conversations about potentially figuring out ways as we move on in society to not make marriage so important. The reality is society is becoming less and less religious. Part of that is because of the bigotry associated with religions. Part of that's because I think a lot of religion, to an extent, and no offense to religious people, is kind of a cope, where people used to be like, oh, there has to be a God because I'm literally dying every day. My children are dying. I'm having 8 kids and 2 are surviving. People are learning to live without religion. They're learning to live without marriage. And so we need to figure out another way to incentivize people raising kids properly and staying together. How do we create that commitment? I think marriage is a great way to do that. I support marriage. I'm in a marriage. But there might be other better ways to do that. And as time goes on and we see more and more divorce rates and fewer marriage rates, and we'll find out if we see an issue in the long term of children getting raised properly or not. Realistically, right now, kids are struggling because they're not getting, the financial resources required. Because, like 1% of the population in our country has like half the wealth. But that's okay. That's not broken or abnormal. That's not a problem. There's no problem there. Instead of focusing on this ridiculous marriage argument, let's focus on getting wealth, trying to get some of the wealth out of these fucking rich people's hands, put it back into helping society through some kind of healthcare reform and some kind of welfare reform in a good way. And let's focus on making people less fucking fat, because I think that's probably a little worse. Let's get our FDA under control. Let's get rid of food shortages and food deserts for poor people who only have access to fucking McDonald's. Let's figure out how to incentivize moving around in a school. Instead of just focusing on like, hey guys, let's do a sports class, do a walking class. I'm not even fucking kidding. If you can get kids to be in the habit from 14 years old to walk a half an hour every day, and you can keep them doing that when they get out of school, those kids are going to be exponentially healthier than the average person like myself. There are bigger problems to solve than what it looks like for two penises to dock each other. I am curious, so I'll educate myself on that later.
I want Papa Gut to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face.